Hello, this is Jenna-D Scott, and I'm going to read you this article titled Income Tax, an Excise, Not a Direct Tax, an Essay. I have also created a recording for this very same article, read aka narrated by AI. If you prefer a more uniform voice, you can listen to that version of this article. And without further ado, let's begin. Income tax, an excise, not a direct tax, an essay. Most people assume that income tax is a direct tax on their earnings. However, documented legal evidence tells a different story. The income tax in the United States is an excise tax, meaning it only applies to specific taxable events or activities, rather than being a general levy on all income. The distinction is not a new or radical interpretation. It has been repeatedly confirmed by the Supreme Court, legal journals, and even government officials. Despite this, common misconceptions persist, fueled in part by misleading statements from tax authorities. The legal foundation: income tax as an excise. Understanding the nature of an excise tax is key. Unlike direct taxes, which must be apportioned among the states based on population, excise taxes are indirect and levied on specific privileges or activities. The Supreme Court has consistently reaffirmed this classification of income tax. In Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad Company, 240 U.S. 1 in 1916, the court ruled, taxation on income, in its nature an excise, entitled to be enforced as such. The ruling further clarified that the 16th Amendment did not create a new power of taxation, but merely removed apportionment restrictions for certain types of income. The court warned that misinterpreting the amendment as allowing a direct unapportioned income tax would create radical and destructive changes in our constitutional system. This point was reiterated in Stanton versus Baltic Mining Company, 240 U.S. 103, also in 1916, which stated, the provisions of the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation, but simply prohibited the previous complete and plenary power of income taxation possessed by Congress from being taken out of the category of indirect taxation to which it inherently belonged. In other words, they nixed it. They said, no, you cannot take income out of the classification of being an excise, aka indirect tax. So that was a little side note. Similarly, Steward Machine Company versus Collector of Internal Revenue, 301 U.S. 548 in 1937, reinforced that all federal taxes fall into two categories: direct, which require apportionment, side note, per the Constitution, we'll get to that, and indirect, which must be uniform. So there's two categories, direct and indirect. Just remember that. Congress, legal scholars, and government experts all agree, is what this headline should say, all agree. This interpretation is not limited to judicial opinions. Scholars and legislative experts have consistently acknowledged that income tax is an excise. The Cornell Law Quarterly from 1915 to 1916 states, the 16th Amendment does not permit a new class of a direct tax. The amendment does not treat income taxes as direct taxes, but simply removed the ground which led to their being considered as such in the Pollock case. Really, so it was just a clarification, the Brushaber and the Pollock cases they mentioned here. There's a bunch of cases. The Harvard Law Review in 1915 and 1916 similarly noted, the amendment was a declaration that an income tax is indirect, rather than an exception to the rule that direct taxes must be apportioned. Even the Treasury Department acknowledged this distinction. Former legislative draftsman F. Morse Hubbard testified before Congress in 1943. He said, "The income tax is an excise tax with respect to certain activities and privileges, which is measured by reference to the income which they produce. The income is not the subject of the tax. It is the basis for determining the amount of tax." Income tax liability, a privilege-based assessment. If income tax is an excise, then liability must be based on engaging in specific taxable activities or privileges, not merely receiving income. The principle is supported by multiple Supreme Court cases, and it honestly, again, side note, should ring a bell with your intuition and your roots. If you're an American, a true American who knows that you are not a slave. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. We'll go back to the article. But all I'm saying is, it should be common sense that you don't pay a tax on your labor, because that would be slave labor. Even if it's 10%, even if it's 1%, if I'm obligated to give 1% of my property, which is my labor, to some nebulous, esoteric agency in another geographic location and in a different jurisdiction completely, it's theft. Anyways, okay, I'm sorry. This is why you might want to listen to the AI, because this gets me riled up. Like, wake up if you've been asleep. Stop being a slave mentality. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Who said that? Bob Marley. Okay, back to taxes. So, not only is this principle supported by multiple Supreme Court cases, it also should be supported by your common sense. But that's okay. That's why I'm here, to help you wake up. Flint versus Stone Tracy Company, 220 U.S. 107 in 1911, established that excise taxes apply to the exercise of privileges. Thomas versus United States, 192 U.S. 363 in 1904, also confirmed that excise taxes are levied on specific activities rather than general property or earnings. If income derived from unprivileged activities were taxed, it would constitute a capitation tax, which is prohibited unless apportioned. In Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust, 157 U.S. 429, 1895, this is a famous court case, by the way, and I highly recommend you get to know it. The court cited Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, stating, "The most generally received opinion is that by direct taxes in the Constitution, those are meant which are raised on the capital or revenue of the people. The right to work and earn a living has historically been recognized as fundamental. In Butchers Union Company versus Crescent City Company, 111 U.S. 746 in 1883, the concurring opinion stated, "The right to follow any of the common occupations of life is an inalienable right." Inalienable, inalienable, not lienable, however you want to say it. Similarly, in Coppage versus Kansas, 236 U.S. 1, 1915, the court ruled, "Included in the right of personal liberty is the right to make contracts for the acquisition of property." The Tennessee Supreme Court in Jack Coal Company versus McFarland, 337 SW.2D, I think that's Southwest, I think it's a lower district court. Not great at the court citations. My apologies. We'll keep barreling through it. SW2D 453 in 1960 reinforced this by stating, "Since the right to receive income or earnings is a right belonging to every person, this right cannot be taxed as a privilege." Apportionment and the constitutional limits of taxation. The U.S. Constitution strictly limits direct taxes. Article 1, subsection 9, clause 4 states, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. Despite claims to the contrary, the 16th Amendment did not alter this fundamental restriction. As Knowlton v. Moore, 178 U.S. 41 in 1900 clarified, direct taxes bear immediately upon persons upon the possession and enjoyment of rights. Thus, the income tax as currently applied to all earnings, without distinguishing privileged activities, raises serious constitutional concerns. Misrepresentation and enforcement of income tax. Despite the clear legal precedent, the IRS and some courts have misrepresented the nature of the income tax on occasion. Some agents in some offices, let's just say, because it is greatly decentralized, or it's centralized, but it's both. For example, in United States versus Francisco, 614 F 2D 617 in 1980, falsely claimed that the 16th Amendment took income tax out of the class of excises, duties, and imposts and placed it in the class of direct taxes. This is why you got to be careful reading court cases and only go by the Supreme Court cases, because this is some shit. Even the IRS website has perpetuated this falsehood, stating the 16th Amendment authorizes a direct, non-apportioned tax upon United States citizens throughout the nation. And they cite United States versus Collins, 920 F 2D 619 in 1990. Completely wrong. This contradicts Brushaber and decades of Supreme Court precedent, highlighting the extent of misinformation surrounding income tax enforcement. And that's a whole nother discussion for another day, which I will get into at some point. However, it's clearly false based on prior long-term precedent and thought leaders' opinions and all of the above. So, conclusion. The historical and legal record is clear. The federal income tax is an excise tax, not a direct tax. It applies only to certain privileged activities and must be interpreted within the limits of constitutional taxation powers. Despite efforts to obscure these facts, Supreme Court rulings, legal scholarship, and government records confirm that income tax liability is based on engaging in taxable privileges, not simply earning a living. Understanding this distinction empowers individuals to ensure their tax obligations align with the actual law, rather than misinterpretations propagated by tax enforcement agencies. Now that you know what you know, what are you going to do? It says, what can you do? But I'm asking, what are you going to do? Because I work with people who comprehend what I'm saying and would like to have knowledge shared with them to support them in self-governance, to get their property back or to not voluntarily hand over their property. However, it's important for you to comprehend this material yourself on an internal level and to be indignant about it almost. I mean, well, I'm not telling you how to feel, but it's your stuff that you're just giving away, and you have been for years because of misleading, false information that has been put out there by these agencies that are supposed to be going by the letter of the law. And that should make you mad. It makes me mad, or maybe not mad or upset, but don't get mad to get even, with love and harmony. Of course, we want to have that iron fist and a velvet glove. Okay? So now that you know what you know, what can you do? Now that you know the truth, you have the power to make sure the IRS processes your taxes correctly. Many people have already, many people, I should say, have already used this knowledge and use it every single year to file their tax returns the right way based on what the law actually says. Would you like to learn more? You can apply to work with us to reassess your taxes, possibly recover money that you've overpaid, and even reduce or eliminate unnecessary tax bills. If you want to do that, you can scan the QR code, which I have right here, or visit https:// B as in boy, it.ly/tax trust coach. And you can sign up for our newsletter, I believe there. Get on the list. Keep learning this stuff. I understand if you're new to this, if you feel a little shaky and you need to continue to DYOR, do your own research and do your own due diligence. Of course, self-governing requires, and being a sovereign, and I'm not talking about sovereign citizens, because sovereign citizens is an oxymoron. We're talking about what our forefathers did when they declared our independence from a tyrannical overlord. We wrote into our early papers and our foundational documents that each and every one of we the people are sovereign. We are the king of ourselves, and that is how it should be anyways. So that is it for this video, and if you wanted to hear this information without all the commentary and the soapbox ranting, then you can access the AI version of this, which I believe I pretty much clearly marked. A lot of it's the same, but it should say read by AI, and that way you can listen to it with all, without all the extra stuff. But I do thank you for listening. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and just get connected so we can all lock arms in participating in our government and in our country for the posterity, for our posterity and for our sacred honor. With that, I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much. Goodbye.